So, yeah. So my session basically based on the real time, like this is not Kubernetes training from scratch. So I am just covering that some advanced topic. So here is the list. Here is the course content. What course like we have to focus on this session. So I'm working in the same domain as a Kubernetes administrator. So in the market there is a lot of opportunity only in Kubernetes profile also. Like if you want to work in DevOps, so Kubernetes is mandatory because when you set up the CI/CD pipeline, so CD pipeline should be you can deploy into the Kubernetes as a pod or as a container. You have to deploy in the Kubernetes cluster, right? The who are in DevOps profile. So Kubernetes is mandatory to learn. Like it will be helpful for the DevOps side also, or you can get into the only profile for the Kubernetes administrator because most of the people like think about the only Kubernetes is using in DevOps profile. There is no role for the Kubernetes administrator, right? So like because the DevOps engineer like set up the CI/CD pipeline, but the company needs a team to manage the Kubernetes cluster because most of the company having 200 plus Kubernetes cluster. So they required some team to manage the Kubernetes cluster. Like if any issue happen over the cluster, like if any issue happen the pod, like if you want to deploy the new application over the cluster, so like if any issue happen over the PVC related, like you have to scale up the cluster, you have to upgrade the cluster time to time because every 3 quarter or every 6 months you have to upgrade your cluster and you have to update your patches. So these are the things. So the topic which I covered, those are only related to the real time, like what I am working from past 2 and 3 years. So what topic like generally we use in the Kubernetes production environment, that topic only I covered in my session. So you can see it here, like so from starting I just started from the scratch, like what is Kubernetes, how many types of Kubernetes cluster, like some bare metal cluster, one are the managed cluster, what is master node, what is worker node, and here I am like the set up the lab on the Azure AKS, and here only the we have used like either EKS as AWS, or you can use the JK in a Google Cloud. So only the platform is changed, but the Kubernetes concept are same in all the environment. Either it is in bare metal or it is in the managed cluster. Managed cluster means the cloud one, like Azure, AWS, Google Cloud. But the rest, all the things like troubleshooting and deployment, like all the concept of the Kubernetes, like service, config map, and deployment file, PVC, secrets, all are the same in all the environment. Okay. Hello. Hello, I'm audible.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So here is the topic, like what is service, how many types of secrets, how to create the SSL certificate, like if you set up, like how do we expose your application to outside the cluster, what is the architecture of like how traffic flow from outside cluster to inside cluster. So those things I will cover in details, like how to upgrade the cluster, how to what are the challenges generally we face during the upgradation, and how to scaling the AKS cluster, how to create a private repository. So private repository, like the private repository is a logical container where we can manage all the images. Okay, so those things we will discuss in details, like what is persistent volume, how do we create the persistent volume, how do we how do we add the existing PVC to the existing application, like how do we use like one PVC in different pod, and how do we extend the persistent volumes, what are the like because in my case I already work on like how one of the applications using 250 GB persistent volume. So those volume has occupied like 240 GB has been occupied by the application data. So we have tasks to extend the persistent volume. So for those tasks, what are all the steps, like how do we extend the persistent volume? What are the pre-tasks? What are the post-tasks? How to validate the things? So do we require downtime? What are the process? Those things we'll discuss in details. And here we can set up the private repository, how to create the private repository, how to push my Docker image from my local machine to the private repository, how to create the secrets so that our pod will authenticate with those private repository. Because in the company or in the production environment, the company like using the private repository, they don't use the public repository. So for security purpose, they have created its own our private repository like Harbor One and the ACR, ECR. So those things we will discuss, like what is storage class, how to create the storage class, how to insert the storage class into the cluster, and what is service principal, how to set up the backup and restoration in the cluster, and how do we migrate. Like I have done the bare metal Kubernetes cluster migrated from bare metal to AKS. So what are all the process, like how do we migrate the cluster from bare metal to cloud? So those things we will discuss, like what are the process. I will show you like how to migrate one resource from one cluster to another cluster. So for that we are using the Veloro backup tool. So I will show you how to set up the backup over the cluster, how do we manage, how to schedule the backup, how to take the backup for particular pod. So those things we will discuss in details, like how do we migrate namespace from one cluster. So I want to migrate namespace. So inside the namespace, like we have 60 or we have 100 plus application running inside the namespace. So how do we migrate like those namespace from one cluster to another cluster, or like if my application running over the bare metal, so the manager decide you have to move all the bare metal bare metal cluster to migrate to the cloud. Because in the bare metal it's very like we have to manage master node and worker node, both we have to manage in the bare metal. But in cloud we have to manage only the worker node, we are not responsible to manage master node. So a lot of this, so much features in the cloud. So nowadays like company migrated to cloud, so they have deployed the application over the cloud Kubernetes. So those things like how to push the image, and what are all the day to day. Generally the student have only theoretical knowledge of Kubernetes, like they can learn from either YouTube or Udemy. So they don't have much experience, like real time experience in the Kubernetes. They haven't idea about what are day to day tasks in Kubernetes, what are the challenges generally we face, what type of issue like we are facing the Kubernetes environment, what are the architecture of the Kubernetes cluster, what are the like how many clusters are details. So those details we can discuss in our session. Like I will explain you what are all the day-to-day tasks in the Kubernetes, so that if you attend any interview for the Kubernetes profile, so that you can tell very confidently like yes, I work in the Kubernetes environment from past 2 years, and you can explain it like what you did. So you can tell them like I my day-to-day task is this one. So you can explain it like your cluster details, like how many total cluster you are managed, which type of cluster you are using, what are the cluster version, which monitoring tool you are using in the Kubernetes, which logging tools, which backup tools, which service you are using to expose your applications. So those things like I will provide all the details of the infrastructure, the architecture of the Kubernetes cluster, what all the tools we are using in the Kubernetes cluster, and I will show you like 20 plus live troubleshooting. Live troubleshooting means I will create the issue, what all the issue I faced in my project, in my current project. So those issue I have created in my lab, like some pod getting image pullback of error, some pods are having crash loopback, some pods are in pending state, some pods are in failed state, right? Some PVs are in pending state. So what is the root cause? Why this issue happened, and how do we fix the issue? Because the interview asked you some scenario based question. Scenario based question, like suppose your one of the pod are getting image pullback of error. Your image are already present in the private repository, and respective tag is also present in the repository, but still we are getting the image pullback of error. Okay, sometimes the application you are down, the respective pods are up and running, but still my application are not accessible. So how do we fix the issue? So have you done the cluster upgradation? What are the challenges you face during the cluster upgradation? How do you fix the issue? Okay, so suppose like in a cluster you have 5 worker node. One of the worker node, like you want to restrict some of the pod are not scheduled on a particular worker node. So how do we achieve this one? So we have like those things I will cover. Like I have already created 15 plus scenario based question, and I will share with you the 50 interview question, and I will discuss about day-to-day tasks in the Kubernetes. I will explain about the infrastructure details of the Kubernetes. I will help you to build a resume regarding the Kubernetes, like what you have to mention in your resume, so that you can like explain like you have worked in the 2 years. So the 2 years you have worked for the 2 years in the Kubernetes profile, and I will show you the 20 live troubleshooting, and apart from that I will cover this some advanced topic which I have shown you here. This is the topic, but we will cover for the advanced topic. And I have already did some like I have completed my batches, so those are also recorded here. So if you go here, like, so you can see I have created 20 plus live troubleshooting videos. So you can see it here. Some pod having image pullback, some pod are image error due to authorization issues, some PVC are stuck in terminating state, so application URL down. So based on that I have collected, or I have like already discussed in my previous batch about the those 20 live troubleshooting. If you go here, if you want to play this one, so you have to see
So
here.
we have to cross check.
So some of the pod, you can see it here. One of the pod is stuck in pending state, and you will get the errors. Like what are the errors are, what are the events, what are the logs is. So I will explain you like how to troubleshoot the issue. What are the first step to troubleshoot? How to find the logs, how to check the logs, and what are the way of troubleshooting. And so those things like decay, because when you check in the logs you will get thousands of lines. So how to filter those logs, how to find the exact logs, exact error with a keyword, and how to fix those issues. So right now we can see here one SQL pod is, some of the pods are running, but
Like
one
in
of
this
the,
case, we are facing the same issue or not.
so one of the pods are having so one of the some of the pods are running some
What is
pod.
the YouTube channel name?
So it's IT Ocean. It's my channel. So those are private videos, not a public. So it's not accessible. So you can see it here. Earlier, the one of the pod is in pending state. You can see it here. The SQL pod was in pending state, but after the troubleshooting, so those issue has been fixed. So like in this session, I have explained you like how do we fix those issue, what is the root cause, and what are the way to fix those issues. So similar, if you go here, so let's pause for 2 minutes. Yeah, hello. So similar, we have another issue like I work on some of the pods are in crash loop backup state, and most of the pods are in running state. So similar type of issue we face in my production environment. Some pods are stuck in crash loop back, some pods are in image pullback, some pods are in failed state, some pods are in pending state, some PVC are in pending state, application URL down. So based on that I have collected 20 plus issue. So those issues we will discuss in our session. So in this session you can see it here, two pause and crash loopback. At the end of session you can see it here, my Tomcat application was in running state. Okay, so similar, some pause and failed state. So we are using the Rancher. Have you heard about Rancher? About the failed. Hello.
Yes, bro. Yeah.
So yeah, you can see it is some pods and failed state. So how to fix the issue? What is the reason of how to like delete all the failed pod? Because generally sometimes you can get a very high count like 500, 600 failed pod are there. You can see it here. There are 465 pods are there. Those are in failed state. So it's very hard to delete one by one pod. So what are the command we have to use in our environment, so that when we run those commands, then the all the fail pod will be deleted at a one shot. So right. So we'll like discuss about all the troubleshooting command, all the like what all the command generally we use in our production environment, so that you can explain to the interview also, like so that the interview asks you about some troubleshooting, like some of the pods getting image pullback of error, some pods and crash loop back, so that after like attend my session or watching my video, you can like explain it like what is the cause of the issue, how to fix those issues. So here you can see it here, one of the pod are having image pullback of error. So after troubleshooting
No
now,
secrets. How to fix the issue? What is the root cause? When you
now
was
the pods are up and running. You can see it here, web app pod. And so this is the overview of this session, like what all the things I like we will cover in this session. So generally this session is fully based on the real time base, what topics generally we use in our production environment. Those topic I will discuss in my session, and I will show you the troubleshooting also, like what type of issue generally we face in the Kubernetes environment, how do you fix those issues, and we'll explain about day-to-day tasks in Kubernetes, and the infrastructure details, so that like you can like get an idea about real time, you can get the idea about the real time exposure in the Kubernetes, so that you can like attend any interview and you can tell the very confidently, because you already saw the infrastructure of the Kubernetes, what are the issues generally we are working in my project. Those I will explain you also, so you can tell them like you have worked on that issue, this issue, you have fixed those issue, what all the challenges. So you can pick up 5 to 6 issue and you can explain to the interviewer. And what like here we are using the nginx ingress controller to exposing the application. So those things like we will discuss, like how to set up the nginx ingress controller, what are the let me show you what are the architecture of the nginx ingress controller. So those things I also covered in my previous batch. So how to create the SSL certificate, where we have to import the SSL certificate, so that our application you are running on the HTTPS. Okay. Yeah, engine is English controller. So here I have explained about the architecture, like how traffic workflow from outside cluster to inside, like our Flipkart pods is running inside the Kubernetes cluster. So how do we access this application? Like I am the end user, I am working from India, and like I want to access those applications. So how traffic flow inside the Kubernetes cluster? So which service we have to use to expose those applications? So those things like we will discuss in details. Hello.
So at the end of the session, are you going to share the videos or
Yes,
how
yes.
it will
Also,
you will walk
I
through
am
this?
taking recording for each and every session, and at the end of session, I will provide the recording session too.
Okay.
So, do you have any question or queries? Let me pause this. So for better, we have set up the rancher to manage all the cluster, so that on the rancher we can able to see all the cluster details, all the pods details. We have to also delete up, scaling up, scale down the pods also from the rancher. We can delete the pod also from the rancher. So it's a very easy tool to handle to manage all the Kubernetes cluster. So for rancher also I will like set up the rancher through Docker command. We can set up the Docker container using the Docker for rancher. We'll add all the cluster into the rancher and we'll like do the practical. So it's a 100% practical, and also we have PPT. So here in the PPT also you can see here some pods are in failed state, some pods are in crash loop back. So some pods fail due to authorization, how to fix those issues. So this is all the what issue I face in my environment. I took the screenshot and I will present to you so that you can get an idea uh, about the production environment, what type of issue generally we face in the production environment. Sometimes we are getting disk pressure alert over the worker node. Sometimes how to set up the alert, generally what we have 100 plus cluster running inside the Kubernetes cluster. So it's very hard to manage all the cluster. We don't need to go manually and check each and every cluster, each and every status of the pod. So for that we have set up the alert, so that if any pod went down or if any issue over the node over the pod, so that we will get a notification over the mail. So that we have to go to that, we have to connect those cluster and check the status of the pod. So I have set up the alert, so you can see it here. I will set up the alert and those alert will come over my mail, so that we'll get an idea the issue happened over that particular pod on the particular cluster. So we have to connect the cluster and check the status of the pod and fix those issues. So how to add cluster into the rancher, how to add existing cluster into the rancher. So AKS cluster upgradation failed. So this is the error what I face in my environment. Like sometime the upgradation failed due to the PDB or due to the proxy internet in so because sometimes the during the cluster upgradation the new worker node will added into the cluster and they can try to pull the extension from the internet. But generally the company using the private cluster, so internets are blocked. So how to overcome this issue, those things we'll discuss. So there's a multiple way why the upgradation fail and how do we fix those issues. So how do we provide the access? So this is the day-to-day task, like how to provide the access to rancher, what are the pods are down due to OCA runtime, how to fix those issue. Pod are having image pullback of error, some pods having virtual memory error. So I have we have 40 plus slides on those issues. So sometimes we are getting sometimes we have some evicted pods are there. So how to fix those issues, like how to delete all the evicted pod or failed pod with a single command that all already showed you in my lab also. And some pods are in terminating state, some pods are in creating state, how to push the image from worker node to ACR repository. Okay, so those things like how to connect my private repository from my jump or from my local machine, and how to tag the image, how to push the image from my local machine to container registry. So those things I will show you in my lab and we'll discuss in details. Okay.